A friend of mine gave me an idea to do a few top 10 lists. So for the first of these Alk's Top 10 videos, we'll be covering my personal top 10 songs from Final Fantasy. Note, these are just my personal opinion, and if you disagree with any of my choices, it's entirely okay. Please feel free to tell me what songs you would put on your top 10 list and why. I'd love to hear them. It's not that any of these songs are better than the other, their placements on the list are simply completely arbitrary. So without further ado, here we go. Number 10, Hero's Theme from Final Fantasy Tactics. The harp used in this theme really sells the song. It evokes both the medieval setting and the noble birth of the protagonist Ramza, though its slight disjointed progression seem to evoke that sense of never quite being proper enough that Ramza shows throughout the game. It's both a strong character piece and a song that evokes distant memories of one's past, and carries a very noble but melancholy feel to it. Number 9, the Rebel Army theme from Final Fantasy II. When you think of a rebellion, you usually think of a group of people striving to succeed in a fight they'll very likely never be able to win. This song is full of hope and, much like our main heroes, is full of determination. The PSP version brings in an acoustic guitar to really help sell the rustic feeling and separate us from the barrage of violins and cellos encompassing the piece. It's a great pick-me-up tune full of drive and moxie. The version featured in Dissidia Arcade is a metal rock battle theme, full of power and guitars to really drive home the power of the track. The backing vocals add an extra layer that makes the whole track seem much more epic. I'll provide a link in the doobly-doo if you guys want to listen to that one. Number 8, Man with the Machine Gun from Final Fantasy VIII. Compared to most other tracks in Final Fantasy, and specifically Final Fantasy VIII, Man with the Machine Gun is such an odd creature. It's much more electronically based, and it's a high-action battle theme that throws you completely for a loop when you first hear it. And it's glorious. It's incredibly catchy, and its feeling of out of place fits entirely with the portions of the game it's used in. Its sound is very industrial, and which seems odd until you remember that Laguna is a soldier, and then you factor in stuff that happens to him later and it all suddenly clicks. Number 7, Mount Gulg from Final Fantasy I. I can't specifically tell you just why this song is so catchy to me. Every version of it just sticks in my head for long periods of time after I hear it. The fact that Final Fantasy IX has both a direct homage to it in Mount Gulug as a dungeon and uses a slower remixed version of the remake really makes me happy. Number 6, Forever Rachel from Final Fantasy VI. Prepare the waterworks, folks. This is perhaps one of the saddest songs in Final Fantasy. This, to me, is where Nobuo Uematsu really pushed the Super Nintendo to its limit, invoking harps, guitars, violins, and flutes with such finesse that you can clearly hear every single instrument in the song without one overpowering the other. For a really good version of this song, the fan-made album Project Majestic Mix, a tribute to Nobuo Uematsu, has a really great orchestral version on disc 2 of the Gold Edition that I'll link here. Number 5, Cosmo Canyon from Final Fantasy VII. I've actually heard people in recent years claim that this song is pretty racist. I I don't... We won't go into that argument. It's stupid. What I will say is that this is perhaps my favorite song in Final Fantasy VII other than Cid's theme. Yeah, it beats out Aerith's theme, and that one's just far too overplayed in my opinion. The drums, the flute, and tambourine actually work really well with the electronic elements Uematsu worked in for harmony tracks. That and the song is just damned catchy. I cannot wait to see what they do with this track for the remake of Final Fantasy VII. Number 4, Eternity, Memory of Light Waves, Final Fantasy X-2, or its alternate title, Kuon, Memories of Waves and Light. X-2 gets a pretty bum rap, man. I mean, it's not a fantastic Final Fantasy game, but it's fun and carries a sense of lightheartedness and seriousness that's sort of absent from a lot of Final Fantasy games these days, though it did turn Riku into an utter fucking moron when she was competent in Final Fantasy X previously. If nothing else, man, this is what should exemplify Final Fantasy X-2 for people. A main thing that never gets enough attention in my opinion. It's equal parts soothing and melancholy, beautiful and tragic. It's a shame we can't get more Final Fantasy themes like this these days, and for some reason, ever since Final Fantasy XIII, we've been getting Western bands doing songs or covers for our releases. Number 3, Youre Not Alone from Final Fantasy IX. Much like Man with the Machine Gun, this song sort of comes out of left field when you hear it, yet unlike that song, this track plays exactly one time. I won't spoil anything, but it happens during a very pivotal moment of the plot, when everything you know as a player about one of the main characters has been thrown entirely out the window. It's a badass, epic theme that totally fits the mood of the scene it accompanies, where the rest of the party bands together to help one of their friends when they are at their absolute lowest. The mix of synthesized voices, drum synths, pan flute, and what sounds to be a shamisen blend together to create an epic and incredibly catchy tune I still find myself humming to this day 16 years later. Number 2, Main Theme of Final Fantasy II. Most of the world themes in Final Fantasy tend to be happy or at least hopeful tunes, but Final Fantasy II's is dark and depressing, striving to survive in a world torn apart by war. The clarinet and oboe really sell that sad, war-torn longing, yet at the same time, there's something about this piece that makes me think of flying through the sky and looking down on the world. I couldn't really tell you what it is that makes me think that. The symphonic suite version is perhaps my favorite arrangement of this tune, and I'll link it below so you guys can hear it. And now for our honorable mentions, those songs that didn't quite make the cut, but I felt needed to be mentioned and described a little bit anyway. The Boundless Ocean from Final Fantasy III. A lovely tune from a game whose music doesn't really get a lot of mention most days. It's an honorable mention because while catchy, it doesn't have a lot of variety, so it's kind of just the same thing over and over and over. Chaos Shrine from Final Fantasy I, or Chaos Temple, depending on what translation you have. This song is actually really close to being on the list proper, but the Nintendo version and the PSP version actually vary a good little bit, and I prefer the PSP version more. It's equal parts eerie and beautiful, haunting and strangely soothing. It is both the first and the last dungeon theme you hear in Final Fantasy I, and for that alone it deserves to be on this list, even if it's just as an honorable mention. Dear Friends from Final Fantasy V. If you get the chance and can find a really good quality video of it, the Distant Worlds performances of this song are a must-watch, as the guitarists always get so into the song they just become completely mellow. It's something we musicians tend to do when we really connect with a song. Something in this song, though, especially in the non-chiptune versions, really reminds me of Chrono Cross. It makes me think of a seaside village rather than an end-game tune, which isn't a bad thing by any means, it's just a little odd, which is why it's only an honorable mention. Shuffle or Boogie, the triple triad theme from Final Fantasy VIII. I cannot tell you how many hours I spend playing triple triad every time I play Final Fantasy VIII. As such, this song becomes both an earworm and an absolute nuisance if you're dealing with annoying rules or NPCs that you swear are cheating. Over the Hill, the world theme of Final Fantasy IX. This is very likely the overworld theme I will never tire of, no matter how long I listen to it. It not only strongly incorporates the game's main theme, Melodies of Life, but invokes a sense of adventure that one would expect to hear while listening to a classic fairy tale. Always be willing to explore. Go on that hike you've always wanted. Just don't bug the Moogle too much or you might find a knife in your back. Battle 1, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. I only actually know this song from Theater Rhythm Curtain Call, which is why it's only an honorable mention, but man, is it one of my favorite songs to play in the game. How has no one done a rocking metal cover of this? Earthbound Papas, I hope you cover this song at some point. I would love to hear what you would do with it. Remnants from Final Fantasy Tactics. If one song fills you with absolute dread in Tactics, it's this one. Usually accompanying incredibly important plot battles or when you're fighting Yunikavi, this theme just screams, run, survive. It never fails to put me on edge when I hear it, no matter how many times I've played the game. Number 1, Home Sweet Home from Final Fantasy V. Ah, Home Sweet Home, what do I begin to say about you? It incorporates so much of what makes Final Fantasy V's music so great. Chord progression and harmonies blend together to create an epic story without words, though other versions of the song do have lyrics. It's the ultimate song for a wanderer, which is exactly what Bart's is. There's a sense of adventure, which you need in an FF title, but there's also a sense of longing and sadness that underlies everything that you don't really get until you travel to Lix, Bart's hometown, and then you find out more about his character and why he is the way he is. It's such an inclusive theme that it even plays in the town exclusively, so it serves as both Bart's theme and the theme for Lix in general. It's just a really strong song with a great sense of nostalgia, adventure, and sadness. It is very much one of my favorite themes in Final Fantasy. If you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and remember, the world is square. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I have a few other ideas for ALK top 10 lists. I know for sure one is going to be on top 10 summons in the Final Fantasy series, and definitely I'm going to do a top 10 characters. These are probably going to take a very long while for me to put out. I don't really have a great recording environment right now, which is why, even though I have Brief History of Final Fantasy for the After Years completely scripted, I don't have any time to record it right now. Hopefully I'll get that out within a month, I'm going to say. If not, it should be out in 2 months' time, I'm hoping at most. But I'll get it out shortly, and then I have to start scripting Brief History of Final Fantasy V. But in between every so many videos, if I have a chance, I'll try to record a top 10 list. Like I said, I know I'm going to do one on summons, and I know I'm going to do one on characters. If I can think of something else, or if you guys have an idea for a top 10 list, feel free to shoot it my way. I didn't do very many battle themes in this because I was thinking of doing just a battle themes top 10 list. I may still do that eventually. It will probably be one of the last top 10 lists I do to kind of, keep the two music ones separate. But like I said, if you guys like this video, feel free to subscribe, leave comments, tell me what your favorite songs are and why you love them so much.